Welcome, everybody, to the PFN Dallas Cowboys Podcast. We are back here for another Dallas Cowboys victory, 30-10. Your Dallas Cowboys defeating the New York Jets. I'm Jess Nevarez alongside Dalton Miller. Dalton, I would say it's like a victory Tuesday, but it's like a victory week, you know? Around here, it's a victory week.
Yeah, and I have one question. Is a 70-point score differential through two games, is that good? Is that good? Like,
define good, because if your definition is Dan Quinn, then yes, it is absolutely tremendous. Again, the Dallas Cowboys continue to raise the bar and just continue to exceed expectations that were already high for them coming off of last year.
I have a stat for the people here.
We love a stat for the people.
I have a stat for the people here. Scoring differential a season ago. The Cowboys is at 70 right now. How many teams do you think had a better than 70-point scoring differential last season?
I'm going to go with none. No, actually, I'm going to go with I'm going to say one. One is my final
There
answer.
were, over the entire season last year, there was only 5 teams with a better scoring differential than 70 last year. It was the 49ers, the Bills, the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, and the Bengals. So 6, but the Cowboys were one of them. And yes, only 6 had a better scoring differential over a 17-game sample than the Cowboys have over a 2-game sample so far.
Boom, mic drop. Like, we can end the podcast right there. That's incredible. We love our Dalton Miller insight there. That was such good stuff. And you pulled that on the spot too. Mm-hmm. Ladies and gents, Dalton Miller, the ultimate professional. He just did that on the spot. But speaking of which, the people also want to hear what your hot or not take of the week is, because I know they're dying to hear it this week. It's a good one. So Dalton Miller, what is your hot or not take for the week?
My hot or not take: the Dallas Cowboys pass rush gets a ton of deserved credit for their ability to create success defensively. Trayvon Diggs, Stephon Gilmore are unbelievable talents on the outside. But the thing that really allows Dan Quinn to be the psychopath that he is defensively are all of the safeties that he is able to put on the field. If you guys go to Twitter and you guys look up at the Coach A, I believe, it's Cody Alexander. He does a ton of film breakdowns. He is a defensive specialist. That's what he does. And he has been looking at the Dallas Cowboys personnel usage over the first 2 weeks, showing big dime, showing a ton of nickel, showing a ton of dime as well. They are throwing safeties out there. They are doing a ton of different things with them, and it is to their benefit because they're still able to play the run at a very high level, and they are not sacrificing their coverage ability with extra linebackers on the field. I'm not worried about the linebacking core at all because you really don't need them at this point when you have guys like Jaron Kearse, when you have guys like Bell, and then you have Hooker and then Dono coming back and being fully healthy at some point. It's going to be an unbelievable defense this entire season, and I would not be surprised whatsoever if it is the best we've seen since those Legion of Boom teams.
So you're saying Doomsday 2.0 in the making right now.
Or 3 or 4, or however many Doomsday defenses you guys think there have been.
Well, this is the Dan Quinn Doomsday, so I think that should strike the fear into most opposing offenses, considering not only do you have a safety core that is so strong, but you have your linebacker core, like you said. The thing about them is the position flex that both of those rooms have within each other, and so that's something that I think is so significant and special to what Dan Quinn brings to this defense, is that you have the versatility. You hear about it all the time on the offensive line, on the offensive side of the ball. You don't really hear about that in the defensive side of the ball, but he talks about how the position flex and the versatility to be able to create linebackers into safeties and vice versa. Man, what can't Dan Quinn do? Maybe he can turn me into a safety. I don't know. I fully believe in Dan Quinn that he could do just about anything if needed. So tweet us or X us, whatever we're calling it these days.
You know what? I'm putting my foot down here. We're just gonna call them tweets. Still, we're just gonna call them. You and I on this podcast, we're just gonna call them tweets. We're not gonna call them X's. It's Twitter still for this podcast purpose because we need to keep this simplistic. We need to.
You know what? The foot is down. I don't know if you've seen the Pixar movie Inside Out, and the foot was just put down. I don't know if you've seen it. That was the scene. Dalton just put the foot down. So heard it here first. They're tweets, and look, they're forever tweets, whether it's X or not, forever tweets. We can die on that hill together. And so tweet us and let us know if you agree with Dalton's hot or not take for the week. Let us know what you think and give us all the flack. Look, we can take the heat and we love some spiciness added to our day. So make sure to go and do that on Twitter. Now, you mentioned earlier some injuries, and you mentioned Donovan Wilson specifically. And Dono has been out since the first day of training camp in Oxnard back at the end of July. I believe it was July 23rd, the exact date that he got hurt. Kind of crazy to think how long this injury has really been an issue for Dono. However, some good news that we got earlier in the week as we go into our injury updates now is Mike McCarthy had talked about Donovan Wilson, Brandon Cooks, and Tyler Smith wanting to get back in this week, and they would be limited on Wednesday to kind of ramp up for Thursday and take it from there. So the way Mike McCarthy works with injuries is he does this ramp up phase, which I think is just so smart. He's very smart and in constant contact with Britt Brown and just that entire medical staff within the Dallas Cowboys to ensure the safety of bringing these players back in. So they're not just going to throw somebody back in. They're going to ease them back into it slowly, right? So it's not 0 to 100 when it comes to injuries for the Dallas Cowboys. Something I think that is a good example of this is Jordan Lewis, who returned finally from that Liz Frank horrific foot injury that he has just been rehabbing since last October. And he took 10 snaps in Sunday's game against the Jets. So a good indication of that's probably not all you're ever going to see of Jordan Lewis on the field. However, they ramp him up slowly as time goes on. But I thought it was interesting yesterday. Mike McCarthy mentioned that he is now kind of behind Deron Bland with that starting position. So J-Lou's not going in there. He's not going to take Deron's spot, which he earned, right? And is very well deserved. I just thought it was interesting that Mike finally said that out loud.
Yeah, and that position specifically is something that when they go into dime, both of those guys are going to be on the field. They run dime about 10% of the time anyways. So those guys both on the field is fantastic, and mostly because Jordan Lewis is so good against the run in those situations as well. He only played, like you said, 10 snaps against the Jets, but he made a play in one of those 10 snaps. So it's good to see him back on the field. And I love the ramp up period as well, because a lot of guys, try to rush back from injuries. These guys want to be on the field. These guys want to play with their brothers. But the ramp up period is really important because you can't just dive back into an NFL game, especially when you have been away from it for so long. These guys are legitimate freak athletes. Every single one of them relatively are freaks compared to the normal human being. So when these guys get back onto the field, they need that slower period. It's like, you don't just go into the gym and immediately put on your PR to try to rep out. You have to work your way up to it. You have to get the muscles ready. You have to get your bones acclimated to those hits that you are about to take. And I think that that's something that Mike McCarthy does very, very well, on top of Britt Brown and this staff being one of the best in the business as well.
Oh, absolutely. And all the kudos and all the flowers to all of them for the amount of injuries that they've brought players back from. I go back to Jalen Smith. That's where my mind goes when I think of injuries that players just it's nearly impossible for them to come back from. And Britt Brown and that whole entire medical staff with the Dallas Cowboys, they really do perform miracles for these players, and the players respect them. I mean, anytime the players talk about Britt Brown, it's very emotional. I remember last week. I remember last week like it was last week. But it's starting to feel that way, guys. But we were at practice, and Aisha Morrison, who I do Girls Talk Boys Talk with, I was kind of on my phone getting ready for the tweets post practice, and she kind of nudged me and she said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Did I see what?" And it was Donovan Wilson and Britt Brown. They shared an embrace, if you will. Dono stretched with the team. He went back to Britt Brown, did some resistance rope work, and then they did this little hug. And Britt kind of patted him on the back as like a your time to shine. You're good to go. We're ready to see it. So I wasn't surprised that Dono wasn't active this week, but I knew that ramp up period was officially underway when I heard that. So interesting there. Other injury news, Zach Martin. This one's interesting because last week he was dealing with some groin tightness, is what he explained it to be on 105.3 The Fan when he did his weekly interview there. And so he goes into the game. He's active, which I don't think anybody doubted that Zach would be active for this game. So he was active. And then he rolled his ankle in the fourth quarter. He was pulled out and then he was questionable to return, which kind of got everybody in a little bit of a panic. However, it was just precautionary. The Cowboys were already winning the game at that point. There was really nothing to worry about. Jerry Jones talked on The Fan this morning. Again, we are Tuesday. And Jerry talked and he said that there's no indication that Zach's going to miss any playing time. So, look, I don't think anybody was questioning that, but in case you were panicking a little bit, there you go. You can continue your day a little stress free knowing that Zach Martin is good to go.
And I believe that it's been a fantastic development that Zach Martin is now on Twitter and is tweeting and is active on it. So I believe he actually said that if the game was actually close, he would have went back into the game. So he quelled my concerns very quickly. Listen, whenever Zach Martin has some sort of injury, I am scared because he's one of the best players in the entire NFL and one of the best right guards in NFL history. So, and still at the top of his game. So it's very good to see that he's still in it. It sucks that he's not 100% totally, but this is a league where, especially in the trenches, you're just not going to be 100%.
Absolutely. And last but very not least, I wanted to mention Tyler Smith and Brandon Cooks. Tyler Smith has been out for the last 2 weeks. Chuma Edoga taking that position, that left guard position while he's been out. But then Chuma goes out of the game with an elbow injury of some sort. It seems like a sprain or some kind of bruise. We don't really have an update on what Chuma is able to do yet. Mike McCarthy said on Monday that, again, he would be one of those guys that would probably be limited on Wednesday and then ramp back up on Thursday. So we'll keep an eye on that. And from what I'm hearing, Tyler Smith should be closer to a game time scenario come Sunday against the Cardinals. So still no firm answer on any of those. Brandon Cooks, though, on the other hand, we're keeping an eye on that one. An MCL sprain, so dealing with a knee issue for Brandon Cooks, which I was not concerned about if he missed this game because it's so early in the season. And really, you have such a strong wide receiver core with the younger guys stepping in. CeeDee Lamb really embracing that wide receiver one role. So it was pretty impressive to see what this group can do, even without Brandon Cooks on the field overall. And we'll get into that in a second. But those are pretty much your injury updates and what we know so far from all things Dallas Cowboys injuries. Dalton, let's get into it because, like you said, the Dallas Cowboys continue to just dominate a 30-10 win against the New York Jets. Absolutely incredible that this team within 2 weeks has held both teams they've played to 10 points. That's it. That is it. And if you look at Zach Wilson's stats during this entire game, you almost think it's like he played a drive in the game. And you don't believe that those are the final stats come out of it. Looking at it, Zach Wilson he was 12 for 27 in passing attempts, 170 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. His quarterback rating, 38.1. And by the way, he led the team in rushing yards for 36 yards at 5 attempts, averaging 7.2 yards per carry, which was significantly more than Breece Hall, who averaged 2.3 yards per carry. He had 4 attempts for 9 yards, folks. 9 yards, Breece Hall. I didn't ever think that would be a statement I ever said, considering we're talking about Breece Hall. But Dalton, what are some of your first initial reactions to this game now that you've had time to sit on it, you've absorbed it, and you had your victory Monday out of the way? Now you're looking at it from a fair football standpoint. What are your first reactions really with it?
Yeah, I kind of always come at it with a fair football standpoint. My wins, my victory Mondays don't really happen. I just kind of get right back to work. You know, we're on to Detroit, as Bill Belichick would say. So I get into it, and I mean, this is just a completely dominant defense. I actually, when I watched the game back, I haven't gotten the all 22 yet, but when I watched the game back, I actually didn't think that in a vacuum, Russell Wilson, sorry,
It's that
that
time of
Zach
the season,
Wilson,
guys. It's
that
that
Zach
time of season.
Wilson played that poorly because the situation that he was in was impossible to operate under. It's very much like what I said with Daniel Jones the week before. There's just no quarterback that, given those circumstances, is going to have a successful game. And yes, outside of the one throw that he had to Garrett Wilson that went for the big play, there wasn't much that happened, but there wasn't much that was going to happen no matter who that quarterback was going to be. And I know that there's a question later about what does this game look like if Aaron Rodgers is still around, and I don't think that it looks all that much different. I think maybe there's a little bit more efficiency in the passing attack, maybe a couple of those slants that didn't get completed because our guys were able to make a play off of a good ball but not a great ball. Maybe those good balls turn into great balls with Aaron Rodgers throwing them, and he throws them away from the defensive leverage and they're able to catch them. But honestly, I don't think it makes all that much of a difference. And when I look back on this game, it could have very easily been 50-10. I also made a mistake earlier and said that the point differential was 70 points. The Cowboys have scored 70 points. The point differential was 60. It doesn't change the numbers that I was talking about earlier, though. They could have won this game by 40. If and we're going to talk about the red zone stuff later, but if it wasn't for them just kind of taking their foot off the gas in the red zone, this game would have been a complete and utter disaster for the New York Jets. And it was already very ugly for them. But this is a football team that legitimately looks like the best in the NFL right now.
Absolutely. And it's really exciting to see what this Texas Coast offense really is for the Dallas Cowboys. Because really, when you're in week one in a rain game plan, you don't get to see what that looks like. You get a very watered down, no pun intended with the rain, but you get a very watered down version of what the Dallas Cowboys
intend the pun. You have to intend the pun.
No, that just, look, puns run so naturally in my blood. That one just came naturally. That one was not planned. There's some planned ones usually, but that one was not. But I'm excited for the starting point because this is really the starting point of what this offense can do under Mike McCarthy calling the plays. What I really love is, first of all, I love that anybody that was doubting Mike McCarthy calling the plays is now kind of sitting back and they're doing the little Homer Simpson going back behind in the bush, Dalton. And look, he's hiding. If you can't see, Dalton's hiding. He's MIA. We don't know where he went.
No comment.
He's not going to comment on that. But what I love is that it shows kind of there was a drop off with the offense last season under Kellen Moore, and not because Kellen Moore was incapable of being a good offensive coordinator. It has nothing to do with that. I think Kellen Moore is great. I think he's brilliant, but I just don't think with the level that your defense is playing at for the Cowboys that it was ever going to match up and it was ever going to be equal on the scale. You needed somebody like McCarthy with 20 years experience play calling. You needed somebody on that side of the ball that could match Dan Quinn's level of defense, and even then, the offense is barely trying to catch up because of what the defense can do, because they've had to practice against the defense this entire offseason. So for me, I'm all for giving Mike McCarthy his flowers for what he's able to do with this Texas Coast offense. So Dalton, real quick, let's get into this because there was a very noticeable quick tempo with this offense.
And can I just bring up more with the Texas Coast offense just in general?
Yeah. Let's talk about it all day. We can talk about it all day.
Yeah, somebody brought it up on Twitter, and I can't remember who it was, but they said, I thought when Mike McCarthy said that Kellen Moore and his offense was built around lighting up the scoreboard, I thought he was insane. I thought he had completely lost his mind. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to light up the scoreboard. But when you really get down to brass tacks here, what they are doing offensively now is going to have a similar effect when it comes to lighting up the scoreboard, but they're going to take less unnecessary risks throughout the process. And Dak Prescott, listen, he's fantastic over the middle of the field. He can test those tight windows. He is a wily vet. He knows what he is doing. But they're taking a little bit of the pressure off of him. They're taking a little bit of the pressure off of the receivers to be able to separate in the intermediate levels of the field. They're getting the ball to their playmakers around the line of scrimmage way more often. They have that quick tempo, which has been fantastic to watch so far. I think they're going to continue to push that envelope. And then we're going to talk about CeeDee Lamb because
Jerry
He
had
is
a little lamb, man. Jerry
he's
had a big lamb, actually.
he's really, really starting to establish himself as one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And it kind of comes down to what we saw in on one specific play in that game, the seam over the middle of the field where he gets his legs taken out from under him. He lands on his head, neck, shoulder, and he pops right back up. His toughness is unbelievable. He's great after the catch. We're not seeing any of the mental lapses that we saw with him last season early on. And in the back half of last year, he looked like a top 5-ish type wide receiver in the NFL. We started to finally see what we saw from him coming out of Oklahoma, which was a truly dominant number one guy on the outside in the slot. Doesn't matter. He's going to win. That's what we have seen from him so far this season. And I'm so excited to see what kind of production he's going to put up as this season progresses.
Oh, CeeDee Lamb. I'm so excited for him. This really has been a long time coming. And like you said, this started really last season. And it started after the OBJ conversation was in there and Brandon Cooks comes in. And look, when you have a guy like Brandon Cooks standing next to you, you have to step it up. You don't really have a choice at that point. It's either I step it up and I'm still my wide receiver one in my own right, or look, there's this guy that could easily step in here and take that spot. But also credit to Brandon Cooks for coming in there and not being that guy trying to take that spot. He's not trying to be the wide receiver one. He's just trying to help in any way that he can make that offense better. And so for me, what you're seeing is a very much wide receiver core that has the Brandon Cooks effect. And not because Brandon Cooks is wide receiver one. I think people are going to get that mistaken once he's ramped up and kind of back at full speed. But because he's able to give these younger guys tips that are going to help them in the long run. He's been doing this for 10 years. The guy knows what he's doing. He's been in CD's position before. He knew how to take that jump and that mindset into the wide receiver one position. And look where he's at. Kind of bummed that we haven't really gotten to see Brandon Cooks at full force, full speed yet, but it's coming. It's coming, and it's gonna be an arrow to the heart to watch Brandon Cooks. But no, I wanted to talk about the quick tempo of this offense and how impactful that has been. A really big conversation that's been going on already this week that I'm sure everybody's going to continue to hear about is Dak's footwork and the work that he's put in on that. Tony Romo said it during the broadcast, and he said he's quicker than he's seen him in years past. And then I knew naturally that would carry over to the Monday press conference, and it did. Everybody was asking Brian Schottenheimer about it, Mike McCarthy about it. And what I liked the most out of this conversation is that Brian Schottenheimer said it's like a dance, that you kind of just know when a quarterback is playing well based on his footwork, and he knows Dak's having a good game, and he's feeling good when he plants his back foot in before releasing the ball. And so that's going to be a big topic of conversation going into the week. But Dalton, fast tempo, they're playing so quick. They don't give the opposing defense time to rest, really, when they're playing that quick, time to think. And it's just such a different feel from last year, from what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think when you get a personnel grouping defensively that you like, that you think that you can take advantage of, having the ability to run up tempo is huge, because you keep that personnel on the field and you can really take advantage of them being in a poor spot defensively. So I think that's what we've seen from them so far. I think that they've used it intelligently so far, and it's a nice little ramp up for what we're going to see later in the year when they're going to have to use this against teams that can actually test this Cowboys defense a little bit and keep games a little bit closer. And we're not going to see it this week, most likely. The Arizona Cardinals have played both teams in week 1 and week 2 quite tightly, but they are the worst roster in the NFL, and we're not going to really see a test until we get to probably New England. But even New England's offense probably doesn't have a great chance against this Cowboys defense. So it'll be interesting to see when Dallas really needs to lean on this tempo for the first time this year.
Absolutely. It's just good to see that they have this starting foundation to build upon it. And something too that I know CeeDee Lamb, since we were just talking about him, brought up in the offseason was that a lot of these guys wanted to build that chemistry with Dak Prescott, specifically him and Dak, for those nonverbal cues. So when they go no huddle, Dak can give him a look, can give him a side eye, can give him some kind of nonverbal cue. that indicates, hey, this is what we're doing. And that's really what CD wanted to hone in on this offseason. And I think you're starting to see that because when they're going really quick tempo, no huddle, even for some plays of it, and CD is continuing to make those big plays, that's where a lot of that comes from. And so it also makes it really hard for defenses that are trying to study film on the Cowboys offense to know what's coming next because they don't know what those cues are for Dak and for CD. So really exciting stuff there. I asked Brian Schottenheimer about it yesterday on Monday in the press conference, and I said, what has it been like for you to really see that part of their game grow together? Because it's been something that CD wanted to work on. He said it's a great example for what these younger guys need to do with their quarterback. And it's true. CD's in that wide receiver one role, setting that example and doing everything he needs to do. But I think that's such an important part of the game that isn't talked about enough when you see successful receivers have that chemistry with their quarterback. And so exciting stuff there. Something else I wanted to talk about was the blocking and how the blocking looked in this game, because I know you know how to look for that when you're watching these games and you're watching back film. Dalton, what did you notice about the blocking portion of this game in the pass pro?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that really stands out to me is Bass coming in for relief of Chuma Edoga and playing quite well, actually. I think the other big thing that I noticed was this was not Terrence Steele's best game, but he was going up mostly against John Franklin Myers, who is a really difficult matchup because he is one of the few edge rushers in the NFL who can survive on the outside playing at a legitimate 280 pounds. He has fantastic power. He uses his length incredibly well. He is a tough matchup for any right tackle because tackles, quite frankly, just aren't used to having to deal with that sort of speed to power ability on the outside. They're used to, seeing the guys that are 260, 265 pounds that are trying to run around them. And Steele is a very powerful guy, but Steele's power comes out more often in the run game than it does in pass protection. And so he had a little bit of a struggle against Franklin Myers. And we obviously saw the hold on Tyron Smith, which I looked at that replay and I didn't see a very big hold, but
Hold in the room with us. I don't think so.
geez. But outside of that, like I really like what I'm seeing from them, especially in the run game. I think that the run blocking has been very good. And I know that Tony Pollard didn't have a huge game on the ground from an average perspective, but I thought that the blocking was pretty good. And I think that that's something that, sometimes, against a really good defense like the New York Jets who are trying to stop the run, I think that they're going to throw assets at that. And you're just not going to have a very consistent day on the ground. You're going to need to rely on explosive runs, which they kind of took away very well against Tony Pollard. And Pollard still got his and he still made guys miss. But the bigger runs, the more consistent runs came from the guys behind Tony Pollard, which is a very good sign.
And you know what I think is so interesting is, it's almost like beating a dead horse with Zeke is gone, and reminding people of that. But this is really what you're going to see in a new era of a running back for the Dallas Cowboys. You're going to see the Tony Pollard era being established. It's not something that he's had to do as the actual one with guys behind him before. And so with Zeke, you kind of knew that Zeke was that short yardage red zone guy for you. And then Tony Pollard was the burst through, get you the long yardage kind of situation. And Zeke, being the bigger guy really that would get you those all of the yards he could, pushing through guys that I don't even know how he could push through. But Tony Pollard is taking a bit of a new role with that wide receiver one, and it's not so much the 1-2 punch anymore. And I wanted to ask you about this ball distribution that we saw with the run game, because it's become like a 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 punch sometimes when you have all of those threats that you have that can play running back. And I say they can play running back because you have guys like Kevontae Turpin that are now taking some rushing snaps. That I love that. I love that Mike McCarthy's not using him as a gadget guy as much anymore. He's trying to see what he can do and throw different people off, because Turp's a guy that you can put on the field and teams are going to say, oh, shoot, what are they going to do? They're going to run it? They're going to pass it? What are we doing here? And then you have Hunter Lipke, the fullback, that I think he was phenomenal in blocking during this game, but you haven't gotten to see him really in that rush game yet do what he's capable of in that aspect of his game. And then you have the people's choice. You have Deuce Vaughn, of course, who is just a bullet flying through really anybody when he's on the field. Rico Dowdle looking fresh, looking fast, looking sharp, playing physical, and blocking. Rico Dowdle, that guy can block.
Yes.
I mean, my goodness, he made some key blocks for a lot of those plays that I don't think will be talked about enough. But as far as this rushing game, it's kind of funny how Cowboys Twitter works sometimes. And oh, Tony Pollard, is he that guy? He is that guy. But you're seeing that run game and this room get reestablished with all of the weapons that they have. They no longer have two weapons; they have about five at their disposal that they can distribute however they want. And Tony Pollard's your lead guy, but you have other guys that are now in the mix. Those younger guys really throwing a wrench for opposing defenses that are trying to scheme against them.
Yeah, but I believe Tony Pollard has the most touches in the NFL so far through 2 weeks. And it stinks for Tony Pollard because he's somebody who had a very low wear and tear on his body up until this season. That's gone. This is what it is going to be for this year. They're going to use him. They're going to abuse him. He is on the franchise tag. He will likely not be a Dallas Cowboy next year. But I like that they are figuring out possibly life after him. I think the biggest thing that I've taken from this Cowboys offense, even more than the passing attack and the West Coast side of things, is with this run game, the explosiveness of it. Because Rico might be even faster than Tony Pollard. I mean, this dude absolutely explodes into the hole. And he's not nearly as elusive as TP is. He's not going to make guys miss in the same way, but he is going to get through the gap at 100 miles an hour, and he's going to punch you in the mouth. He's going to put his head down, and he is going to fall forward. And then you have Deuce Vaughn, who isn't as fast, but is incredibly twitchy. He's able to make guys miss at an incredibly high rate. And as long as he catches the football the first time he tries to catch the football, he will be a fantastic weapon in the passing attack as a leak, kind of late receiver check down type guy as well. And then you have Kevontae Turpin, who is getting the ball out of the backfield. They're finding ways to get him touches and try to create explosive plays on the ground with him, in the passing attack with him as well, with manufactured touches. And like you said, Hunter hasn't run the ball yet, but he's somebody who, if they want to get a yard or two, he's a guy who can come in and get that yard or two and fall forward. So they have a ton of different options to get the ball. Big thing that we were talking about earlier was tempo. 83 offensive plays in that game against the New York Jets is a good sign. It gives them a ton of opportunities to put the ball on the ground and run and get these first downs that they get, and pass the ball early and set up these third and shorts to run and get first downs. It's been fun to watch so far.
Absolutely. And so, I wanted to bring this rushing conversation up a little bit before the red zone conversation because Zeke was your red zone guy. Period. That's what it's been. He led the league in rushing touchdowns last year because he was dominant in the red zone. So you knew without Zeke, the question in the season became, who's your new red zone guy? I don't really know if the Cowboys have figured that out quite yet. I think they're kind of in the process of figuring that out. However, the lack of productivity in the red zone, if you can be nitpicky about this team right now from what you saw in the second week in a non-rain game plan, is the lack of productivity and capitalizing in the red zone, settling for field goals, which shout out to Brandon Aubrey for the 16 points that he put on the board just by himself during this game. Very key point and key part of why the Cowboys were able to capitalize on this win so quickly was his efficiency and finally having his first perfect game in the NFL. So exciting for Brandon Aubrey there as well. But Dalton, what do the Cowboys need to do to capitalize on the red zone when you were looking at everything? What did you notice that they were kind of missing? Was it the play calling? What was it? What was not working in the red zone?
Keep using those tight ends. I think that's kind of the key to the red zone this year. I don't know how the run game in the red zone is always really tricky to me. I think I love the under center play action game in the red zone, but that's a dangerous game because if you're going to run under center play action, there's a very big chance that you are going to leave a guy, the end man on the line, unblocked, and that can lead to very, very easy sacks and mistakes from even the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So I think that you need to find what works for your team, especially early in the season here. I think you test stuff out, figure out what's going to work, especially against teams like the Jets without Aaron Rodgers and the Arizona Cardinals. Figure out, test things out, toy with stuff, and see if you can figure something out, because I think the red zone is where I think really condensing things and then using that speed that you have finally figured out on offense to your advantage. Get Turpin the ball on toss sweeps. Get him the ball on jet sweeps. Try to get the ball to the outside quick. Use Dak Prescott in the rushing attack in the red zone. He is not a running quarterback anymore, but he can still provide value, adding a gap to your defensive responsibilities in the zone read option game. He won't keep it very often, but when he does keep it, he keeps it for a good reason. And he is a very good runner when the end zone is in his sights.
And something to mention about the young tight end room is they're without Dalton Schultz. This is their first year being as young as really they are in a while. Dalton Schultz was that guy for Dak. He was pretty much a clutch guy last season.
For reference, the rookie that they just drafted is the oldest guy in the room. Well,
Right.
Sean is kind of, but
Yeah, Sean is, but age-wise,
Yeah.
Luke Schoonmaker also up there, also getting his first NFL touchdown
Yeah.
On Sunday as well. So congrats to Luke Schoonmaker there, or Schoon, as I heard on the TV broadcast. So exciting stuff there. But this tight end room has a lot of potential to be great, and they're still young. They're still figuring things out. But if that's their starting point, uh, especially when you talk in terms of not so great of a week one with the dropped passes, and then week two going in there to say, hey, we're going to be the only ones to get rushing or receiving touchdowns this week. Looks like improvement to me, and that's all you can ask, that these guys are coachable and they're willing to learn, which they absolutely are. Lunda Wells talks so highly of them, their tight ends coach, when he talks about his guys, his room. He has their back, he has their number, and they always know that. So let's switch sides of the ball. Let's talk defense a little bit here, because Dalton, it's just, this is like a very toxic cycle we're all in at this point. Every week we say Micah Parsons is amazing, and how can he get any better, and he's so great. And then at the end of the week we're like, so what else can he do this week? Are we still going to be that impressed? What's going to happen? And then the next week we're still on that level of excitement for what we see from Micah Parsons, making a statement early. I'm talking as early as the Jets' first drive in the game. Him and Tank Lawrence really said, "Hey, it's us. Hi, we're here. We're not going to do this today." And so, what was your initial reaction out of what you saw from this defense against a Jets offense that they could kind of bully around a little bit during this game?
Yeah, they were just really aggressive the entire game. I don't think they're going to play that aggressively every week, because I think you're going to play better quarterbacks eventually. I don't know when that time is going to come, because you're looking at Josh Dobbs and Mac Jones coming up. So not the best slate of quarterbacks, but at some point you're going to have to sit back. You're going to have to play a little bit more zone. You're not going to be able to run a bunch of cover one. You're not going to be able to bring a bunch of 5 and 6 man pressures. But I think when you look at this, it's not just Micah Parsons. It's not just DeMarcus Lawrence. It's Osa. It's, guys coming off, the second wave of guys, Dorrance. I mean, it's just a fantastic group overall. They have so much depth that I really am just not worried about this defense at all. And defenses are very not sticky from game to game, from week to week, from year to year even. But I think when you have the type of cohesiveness that this unit seems to have, when you have the safety play, and I'm going to keep coming back to this, because when you run an aggressive defense like they are right now, you need that guy in the middle of the field to patrol. And guys, I think Malik Hooker might be totally back to his Ohio State days, because that play that he made, that interception that he had, was unbelievable. The range that he showed on that play was outrageous. And is he always going to get there in that situation? No, because other quarterbacks will not put so much air under that ball. They won't stare that side of the field down the way that he did. But to make that play in that situation showed the type of high-end range that he has. And people want to bring up, the one missed tackle that he has. He's missed like 3 missed tackles in 2 years. So this is a guy who is playing fantastic. Like I said, on top of that, you have literally all of the other safeties that they put on the field. And so when you look at it from all three levels, the safeties are playing linebacker and they're playing linebacker at a high level. You have LVE playing linebacker at a high level. You have a dominant defensive front. And then you have two of the top, at worst, 10 corners in the NFL. There's just so much for Dan Quinn to play with here. And it's so difficult when you can just line up and say, hey, you go cover him in man. They're not going to beat us. We're going to attack this quarterback. It's going to change eventually, but I really do think that this team is set up for continued success defensively.
And going back to Malik Hooker, because one missed tackle, which was one of two of the entire game. Let's not forget that. Second week in the row, the Dallas Cowboys defense has only missed 2 tackles during a game. So that doesn't give you perspective on how much they're emphasizing completing tackles. I don't know what does. And I still think Dan Quinn isn't happy with the number 2. I think he wants it to be to 0, negative if he could in that aspect as well. But Malik Hooker, yes, had the missed tackle, which led to the Jets' only touchdown of the game. However, what I really like from Malik is he said, okay, well, comeback season coming soon. And it was soon because guess what? He got his first interception of 2023, right, after that, essentially. Him, Jaron Curse, and then Trayvon Diggs all racking up their first interceptions of the 2023 season. First of many, I feel like, coming for that group specifically. 3 sacks on Zach Wilson, 2 from the Lion, Micah Parsons, 1 from Osa Odigizua, like you mentioned earlier. And so, when you have a defense that's playing this aggressive, here's the thing. I'm so glad you mentioned that they're not going to be doing this every week because physically they can't. And it's a long season, 17 weeks. You can't afford to injure somebody by playing that much, especially if your offense is, dominating like they did time of possession and you're going quick 3 and outs. You have to protect that longevity of all of these guys for the rest of the season. So they played aggressive, and I think their take is play aggressive fast, start striking the fear of Micah Parsons or the edge rush in general into your opposing quarterback, and then you can kind of ease off, force them to throw downfield, and then you have pick city that really pops up for any opposing quarterback. So Zach Wilson, Daniel Jones, just 2 of the latest victims falling short to the Dallas Cowboys defense in the last couple of weeks. Last but certainly not least, Dalton, the Dallas Cowboys face the Arizona Cardinals, and I swear if anybody uses my most hated phrase this week, I am going to scream. If I hear anybody calling this a trap game, I'm gonna scream. I'm just saying, I hate that phrase. I hate it so much. Like, can we come up with something new? I hate it. But what are some of the key matchups that you're looking for with this game? I know there's not a lot. I know you're giving me that look. There's not a lot. But what is something you want to see out of this game for the Cowboys?
Just take care of business. Just continue to take care of business. Don't let them stick around the way that Arizona has stuck around with Washington and New York. I think the sign of a good football team is coming in and being professionals and taking care of business against lesser opponents. There's the roster is so bad. There are no individual matchups that I'm really circling. And we have to get out of here anyways, because we're already pushing up against time. So
Absolutely. I mean, I just thought I'd mention it, and there you go.
Right. You're right to do that.
There's Dalton Miller's key matchups for week 3 of the NFL.
As Johnny Manziel once said on Netflix, none, 0.
Oh, man. Real quick, who's your PFN MVP for the week? We forgot to mention that for week 2 of the season.
CeeDee Lamb is my PFN MVP. MVP.
Exactly. We're going to get that right eventually.
One of these days.
Eventually. I'm giving mine to Dak Prescott because through all the scrutiny, through all of the nonstop irrelevant conversations about his interceptions last year, he continues to prove people wrong. And I'm just really excited for what this offense can look like for him now under Mike McCarthy. Dalton Miller, where can the people find you if they want to tweet you? Because that's what's forever called. Where can they tweet you?
Dalton B. Miller.
I love it. You're so quick with this. You're so quick. I can barely keep up. Jess Nevarez _ on Twitter. If you have anything to tell us, let us know if you agree with Dalton's hot or not take during the week. Send this podcast episode to all of your Cowboys friends or your Eagles friends. I don't really care either way. Hello, Eagles fans. If you're listening, we yeah, we don't really have much to say to you yet, but we will. That's me being intimidating. I hope it worked. um, but thank you guys so much for listening every week. Please make sure to give us all 5 stars, rate all 5 stars without rating wherever you listen to your podcast. We really appreciate it. Let us know what you think. And as always, go be amazing. Thank you so much for being as awesome as you are. And as Mike McCarthy says, carpe omnia, everybody. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.